Hello Year 4 and welcome back to week 1999 of home learning. Well, not really, but at this point I've filmed so many videos that I'm considering a career change to show business. What do you think? No? Okay, I'll stick to teaching. But anyway, jokes aside, we have got so much fantastic and fun learning for you this week involving an egg, some chocolate, and of course, this dragon. So stay tuned to find out more. So talking of dragons, we are of course for English and Guided Reading, carrying on with our reading of The Boy Who Grew Dragons. And we're going to be reading chapter 4, which is called It's a Dragon. And as always, you've got a copy of the text on your PDF, and also there's a link to listen to Andy Shepherd, the author, read the chapter herself, which is always nice to hear, because you don't get to hear authors read their books that often, do you? So this week, what we would like to do is read chapter 4, and then your English learning this week is based on fronted adverbials, and I can hear you all cheering right now. So we have noticed over the last weeks or so, months probably now, that you are including loads of fronted adverbials in your writing, but we just want to make sure that all of us are getting those fronted adverbials bang on with the comma in the correct place, which is the hardest part to get right. So we have given you some sentences including a fronted adverbial, but of course we haven't given you the comma. So you need to read through those sentences and decide where you should place the comma. And remember, there are 5 different types of fronted adverbial. Can you remember any of them? I bet you've said time. I bet you said place, maybe. But the other ones that we often forget are frequency, manner, and degree. So degree is also sometimes known as the possibility of something happening as well. So we often use manner quite often, and those can sometimes be adverbs. So slowly, Thomas raced down the stairs. Okay. Frequency, that's how often something happens. So often is a fronted adverbial because that's saying that something happens often. Once or twice, constantly, rarely, all those are different types of fronted adverbials for frequency. Time, really easy. Yesterday, this morning, afterwards, immediately. And then degree is often the trickiest one. So that is the possibility of something happening. But we might have seen it with Thomas, so in some of your diary entries, so nearly asleep. So you're not fully asleep, but you're nearly there, so that's a possibility. Maybe. Barely alive. Hardly out of breath, all those ones. But there is this sheet which is going to help and support you a little bit, because what we would like you to do, once you've added that comma in, we would like you to create 5 of your own sentences. Excuse the cat. Using these fronted adverbial types. So we'd like 1 sentence for each. They don't have to be about the text, but you probably get a few bonus points if you can link them to the text. You can make it up, it doesn't have to be about what actually happens, but it's always nice when we link something to the text. Okay, so that is your English. And our guided reading this week, we would like you to write a prediction of what you think is going to happen in chapter 5. So we make great predictions, but the way we can really make them more likely to be accurate is by using our inference skills and using what we already know and what is provided to us by the text. So I have included a little bit of a hint on the PDF, and that hint is to look at the chapter name for chapter 5. And I'm not going to talk anymore because it will give you a massive giveaway, but consider the name of that chapter and maybe the last sentence of chapter 4. What do you think is going to happen next? I really look forward to seeing what your predictions are, because this is one of my favourite lessons normally, because it tells me how spot on you are and how brilliant you've become at using your inference skills to inform your own predictions. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that. So that is your English and guided reading for this week. So our maths learning this week is going to include chocolate. Any ideas what it might be? How about if I show you the chocolate bar outside of his wrapper in the parts that make the whole? That's right, we are going to be looking at fractions this week, and we are going to be focusing on adding and subtracting fractions with the same denominator. can we remember what we mean by denominator? So the denominator is the number on the bottom of the fraction. So let me just fold this. So if I was to show you this number there, 2/4, the denominator is our number on the bottom, and that is how many parts would make the whole. And then the numerator shows us how many parts we have got of that whole. We've got 2/4, which is the same as 1/2, exactly. So when we add or subtract fractions, doesn't matter if you're adding or subtracting, one thing always stays the same. And we've repeated this so many times, so can you remember what stays the same? That's correct, it is the denominator. So if I was to add 2/4, add 1/4, the 4 would always remain the same. I do not add my denominator, it stays the same. So you can straight away stick that denominator on the bottom of your fraction because it isn't going to change. So then I go to my numerators, which I've got 2 and 1, which equals 3. So my answer is 3/4. It is literally as simple as that, until we get to dealing with whole numbers and numbers that are larger than our fraction, which sometimes are known as top-heavy fractions, but the real term to be using is improper fractions, okay? And we can change those to mixed numbers, and that is where the chocolate is going to come in. And there is an example on your PDF, if I don't clarify it enough for you, but I'm going to use the chocolate now, so I'm going to switch the video to show you how we can add fractions that are top heavy. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so here is where the chocolate comes in. So if I have my 5 parts to make my whole, you can see there I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts. Okay, so my denominator would be 5, and here, say if I took 1 away, how many parts have I got to make that whole, to make that denominator 5? I've got 4 parts. Okay, so I would put 4. If I had 5 parts, my numerator would be 5, and so would my denominator. Which means that that is the same as what? Can anyone remember? So that would be the same as writing the number 1. So when we come to adding fractions that go higher than 1, than the whole of the fraction, we get what I've discussed earlier, which is an improper fraction or a top-heavy fraction, because the number at the top is larger than the number at the bottom for the denominator. So let's do another example. So say I had 4/5 again. So I'm going to write that here. And I added that fraction with 2 parts of the whole. So we still remember that 5 parts makes our whole. Our denominator is 5. That's the parts that complete to make the whole. So my denominator is going to be 5, and the parts that I have got are 2 parts. So my first rule that I always remember is my denominator. I don't change it, I don't add it, I don't subtract it, I don't do anything to that other than stick it back on the bottom. But now I've got to add my 2 fractions. So I've got 4 parts, add 2 parts of the whole. So 4 add 2, really simply, is 6. But there we have our top-heavy fraction. Okay, the number of our numerator must stay less than our denominator. And if it does become higher and become an improper fraction, we need to change that to a mixed number. Okay, so how we do that is we remember how many parts make our whole. So 5/5 makes our whole, which is the same as number 1. So when we look back at this number, how many parts of the whole have we got? Well, we've got more than we need. So what I would do is I would write that I've got 1. Because I've already got those 5/5. But how many have I got left over on top of those 5/5? Well, the difference between 5 and 6 is 1. So what is left over is 1 part. I've got a whole and 1 part. So if I was to put those together, I've got 5, which makes my whole, or my number 1. And then I've got 1 part left over, but if we write it like that, it looks like we're writing a whole number. So we need to still write it as our numerator and our denominator, the parts of the whole. So
6/5, 6/5 would be the same as 1 and 1/5. Okay, I hope that makes sense. I'm going to do one more for you. And there is an example on the PDF as well that uses pizzas if you're more of a pizza person than a chocolate person. So let's do 4/5. Okay, so we know 5 parts of chocolate makes the whole chocolate bar. Okay, so that's our denominator again, just to remind you. So I've got 4 parts. And if I add, oh, let's do a bigger one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's do that. See if that one throws any of us. Okay, so I've got 4/5 add. Well, I've got 5/5, which is the same as 1. But because we're adding them, I'm just going to keep them written as a fraction. But that is the same as writing number 1 because I've got the whole of the chocolate bar. I've got all the parts that make the whole. So again, our denominator stays the same. I'm sorry I'm left-handed. It does become very annoying, as my class know. And then we need to add our numerators, so the parts that make the whole. So here I've got 5/5, so I've got my whole, and I need to add that 4. So 4 add 5 would be 9, which again is an improper fraction. So it's top heavy, and we need to change that to a mixed number. So again, we know 5/5 makes the whole, but we've got 9. So we already know we've got a complete whole. And then how many parts have we got left over? Well, if we count on from 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, we've got 4 parts on top of the whole. But we need to write it as a fraction. So we've got 1 whole and 4/5. And that is exactly the same as writing 9/5. But we don't like to see it written like this because it's top heavy. So we have to change it to a mixed number. So have a go. See how you get on. I know you can smash it. Maybe use some chocolate if it's going to help you. Or you could just cut some paper out like I have here and do it like that. Okay, so let's see how we get on with our fractions. And the best part is afterwards, get to eat it.
So in science this week, these are going to be very important for our investigation that we're going to be completing, all about tooth decay. And the reason we are using X is because on your teeth, the very front of your teeth, is something called enamel, and that protects your teeth from tooth decay. However, that enamel can wear away for various different reasons that we're going to explore in our investigation. And the reason we are using X is because the shell of the egg replicates the enamel on our teeth, meaning the effects of certain things on our teeth would be very similar to the effects that it has on the eggshell. So for our investigation, we can't take out our teeth and pop them in our drink for our investigation. So we are going to use the eggshell. So you will need 2 eggs because you have 4 drinks to investigate. And I'm going to pause and bring those back to you in a second. So you will need some sort of juice, okay, or squash. It doesn't have to be juice. So I've got some Tropicana orange juice here. I would actually suggest you don't use a drink this expensive. Just use any old cheap juice or squash that you can find. So you'll need some juice or squash. You'll need some milk. Doesn't really matter which type you use, but that might be an interesting thing to find out, whether the type of milk makes any difference in the investigation. You need a glass of water, which I've just had to steal away from my cat, who is currently drinking it, so there might not be a fair test because there might not be anything in there. And then you need some Diet Coke. See, I here have got Coca-Cola, but actually the cheaper the Coke, the better. I actually just couldn't find another bottle. This is all that I could find. And then what you are going to need to do is, to set up your investigation, is to break the eggshell. So you will have halves, so 2 halves. That's why you only need 2 eggs. So you need to obviously make sure there's no egg left inside and try and keep it together as much as you can. You can see there I've got some cracks. That doesn't matter too much, but try and keep it as intact as you can. Okay, and then you're going to need 4 plastic cups. So I've got a blue one, a green one, a pink one, and a Hotel Transylvania one. So what you are going to do is to set up your investigation as a fair test. So to make sure it's a fair test, we need to make sure that certain things are kept the same. You might not have a measuring jug at home, but if you do, you can make sure you measure the same amount of liquid for each cup, or you can just eyeball it and try and make sure it's at the similar height. So I'm going to do the Coca-Cola. So I'm going to put my Coca-Cola and hope it doesn't fizz all over me. And then I am going to add it to my cup. Okay, you want your egg to be submerged in your liquid. You don't want it to be floating or sitting on the top. So my cups are quite small, so I'm going to have to fill it up pretty high. And then, this is probably a bit more than half of an eggshell, but it doesn't particularly matter. I'm going to pop my eggshell in the Coke, and I'm going to try and stick it in a little bit. It will probably pop back up, but as long as it's in there mostly. I might try and flip it round. Okay, so I'm going to leave that one there, and then I'm going to repeat the investigation for my milk, my water and my juice. Okay, and then what we want you to do is write a prediction. So what do you think is going to happen to each of the eggshells in the different liquid? So it's all about the enamel on our teeth, like I've mentioned before. So which drink do you think is going to cause the most damage to the enamel, to the eggshell? And which do you think is going to have very little difference to the eggshell? Maybe it won't make any impact at all to the enamel for the eggshell. So you've got some sentence starters to support you on that. So you need to make sure you've got all 4 set up and you're going to watch them over time. I would suggest don't put them by a window, because that's what we did last year, and you will end up with some very smelly rotten eggs. So try and find a space where you can keep them safe. So I know I'm going to have to keep mine away from my cats, so you can watch over time what is going to happen to your eggshells, to the enamel on your teeth. So very excited, and we look forward to seeing some pictures over the next 3 weeks as well to see what happens to your eggshells. Okay, so drawing to a close, because I know I've been talking for a really long time, which isn't like me. Joking. This week in our French, we would like you to learn all about the parts of your body and have a go at labelling those. So you might want to draw a picture of the body and label them, and you might want to record yourself reciting those words, or maybe you want to, if you've got access to a printer, you might want to print a picture of yourself, or use a picture that you've already got printed off and label the parts of the body. Or maybe you could use a book. If you've got a character in a book, you could maybe label the parts on that, or somebody from a magazine. Okay, please keep the videos coming, because we absolutely love listening to you speaking French. It has me, I know for one, belly laughing half the time, because it's just so brilliant. And then finally, we've got some art and a bit of a PE activity. There's a cat who wants to be famous. Let's move her out the way. Look how big she's getting now, guys. So for our art, what we would like you to do is have a go at writing your name in graffiti style, which is really cool. So there's some examples on the sheet for you that you might want to magpie and replicate, but make them as colourful, as funky as you can. And then for PE, there's an alphabet activity. And what you need to do is know your name, for a start, and you need to follow each activity based on the letters of your name. So my name begins with an M, so if I look at M, it says do 3 somersaults. I don't think I'm going to be doing that. But to make it a further challenge, include your middle name and your last name, okay? See how out of breath you get. And if you want, you can have you record yourself having a go at these. That'd be really funny to see. Okay, so keep the learning coming in. We aren't seeing as many of you sending learning in at the minute. I know we've had half term, okay? You might be feeling a bit tired, but keep that learning in. We need to see something from you once a week. That's it. Once a week is more than enough, okay? Keep doing your Times Table rock stars, because we're doing really well at the moment, but you know what year 5 are like, okay? And keep sending in your storyteller videos, because we aren't getting very many of those at the moment, okay? Stay safe, stay smiley, and we will speak to you and see you next week. Bye.